Hello and welcome to a webinar brought to you by AIA Contract Documents. My name is Mike Koger and I'm a staff attorney with the American Institute of Architects and I work in the Contract Documents Department. I am joined on this webinar by my colleague Ben Segal, who is the man behind our Documents Information Program, which is of course the subject of this webinar. This webinar is going to be a little bit different than anything we've done in the past. The entire point of this webinar is for us to answer questions that you might have about our contract documents. We're not going to be showing a big PowerPoint presentation. We're going to be sharing a screen and answering questions as they come up. So for those of you who are unaware, we offer a program called Contract Documents Information. We commonly call that docinfo. Where anyone can call us up or write us an email and ask questions about our contracts. We can do things like help you pick out the right contract document in our library, or we can also let you know like some of the intent behind particular language that you might find in our contracts. And if you've ever called docinfo in the past, the person that you are most likely to get on the other end of the phone is Ben. Ben has been with AIA for over 10 years. Ben, how long have you been with AIA?
15 years, actually.
15 years, my goodness. Okay.
Yeah.
Time flies. And Ben does things like, he does presentations routinely aside from, answering, questions with docinfo. He does presentations on things like how to navigate through our document software, how to complete payment applications, and I'm forever thankful that I get to pass off difficult questions like that to Ben. So here's how this webinar is going to work. Ben and I we came up with a list of our, most common 15 or 20 questions that we get through docinfo, and we're going to go through that list and answer them, our most common questions for you. But we really want to encourage folks to send us questions that you might have through the GoToWebinar app. So you should be able to, in that little, dialog box that kind of pops up on the right-hand side of your screen, you should be able to type in questions. So we want to encourage you to send us your questions. We'll do our best to answer them. We'll try to go in the order that we get them. And we'll try and answer them right on the spot. Some of the questions, they may be, require a bit more research on our part. So if we have a particularly difficult question, we may have to get back to you and at a later time once we've had a chance to go back and read through some of our contracts. But we'll try and answer our questions right here on the spot. And before I go any further, I want to make sure I give the docinfo email and phone number as well as the tech support email and phone number if you have technical questions about our document software. And just fair warning, if you're calling docinfo right now, you're not going to get Ben. You're probably not going to get anyone on the phone because Ben is here live with me. So the docinfo email address is docinfo@aia.org. That's docinfo@aia.org. The phone number is 202-626-7526. Our tech support email is docstechsupport@aia.org. That's docstechsupport@aia.org, and their phone number is 1-800-942-7732. And lastly, before we get into things and start answering questions, I have a couple of disclaimers. First, we can't give legal advice on this webinar, and nothing you hear in this webinar is a substitute for consulting with an attorney who is licensed in your jurisdiction who can talk with you about the specific issues that you are facing. And second, as I mentioned a couple times already, we do have a separate department within AIA Contract Documents that deals with technical support issues for our online document software. If you have a software tech support related question, we'll do our best to answer it in this webinar, but we may have to refer you to our tech support team if we get in over our heads. So with that, Ben, do you have any opening remarks before we start answering questions?
Not really. We can just go ahead and get right into it.
Excellent. Okay. So the first question, and this is one that we constantly get, and it is probably one of our most common questions that we've had, particularly in the last 6 months, is can you sign AIA contracts digitally? And if so, how do you do it?
Yes, so that is a common question since a lot of people, including those of us at the AIA, are working from home. So right now, you should be able to see my screen I'm logged into the AIA Contract Documents online service. I'm going to go to My Settings at the top here. So top right of the page, if you click My Settings, you can change a lot of the various settings associated with your account. So if you go over here to the Document tab, you can set a lot of different options. So you can do a digital signature placeholder. And so I have it set to ask each time. As you can see, I have most of these things set to ask each time. But you can say never or always. Again, I prefer ask each time just personally because that'll give you the option to do that. As far as what it actually looks like, and you find down here at the bottom, you can restore your defaults or just click OK to change your options. But there are various options here. This specific one is about a digital signature placeholder. And so again, I have it set to ask each time. Let me give you a practical example of how that actually works. So I'm going to go to my Projects tab here. So I've got my projects here, and I have my documents in these projects. So if I go to all my documents, see if I have a draft here I can finalize for you. Okay, so here's a draft. So if I want to finalize it, I click Finalize. Because of the settings that I've selected, it's going to ask me about how it's going to be done. So you can choose clean or comparative, and we can talk about that in a bit too. And then you click OK, and it will give you, let me see here. Should give you the final document. Sorry, it's spinning here a second. So the final document is going to be a PDF, and it's a locked PDF. Here we go. All right, so let's open it up with Adobe. Okay, so here's the document. It's a final. It's a PDF, and let's see here. At the end of the document, I picked a long document, but here's the additions and deletions report. Let's see here. Here's a certificate. Okay, I'm sorry that this is not the right thing. Let me go back and let me try something else. Sorry. Finalize this one. Okay, here we go. I'm sorry about that before. So you didn't see this option the last time. So before you just saw this. So again, you have clean or comparative. That's how the changes are shown. As far as signature, you can do written or digital. So if you do written, it's going to show basically what you just saw, which is just the, just the document as it is. You can print it and sign it. But if you do a digital signature, I'm not going to save my preference, but I'm just going to say yes, let's do that. And let's do comparative this time. Click OK. So this is going to create a final document with a digital signature, and I'll show you what that looks like. Again, we'll open it up in Adobe. You can open up a final in Adobe or anything that'll open up a PDF. So here's my final. It's a PDF. And so if we scroll to the end here, this is the page, the digital signature page. So this stuff, everything else in the document, this is all locked. And where there's a signature, it puts a note, see attached digital signature page. So that appears wherever there's supposed to be a signature. And then we have this digital signature page. This is just a single page with a bunch of areas, and you can insert digital signatures onto this area. Click to sign. So that's how that works. Again, this works with Adobe or any PDF program, and this is the final document with the digital signature.
Excellent. And Ben, just to clarify, you can also do for all of our G-Series forms, you can sign them digitally as well, right?
Yes, that's correct. There is a difference between, we have essentially two types of documents. This document, A105, is what we call an agreement. And so you can see it's a multi-page agreement, and it has this digital signature because I chose that option. You can also do this exact same thing with a form. A form is something like a change order or a payment application, typically these are 1 or 2 pages, but you can digitally sign those forms as well, and it's basically the same thing. There'll be a note that says see attached digital signature page. Pardon me. There'll be a note that says see attached, and then there'll be this page. So it just will add this extra page to the end of the form just like it does for here. So that, in that sense, you can digitally sign a form just like you can digitally sign an agreement, but there is an important distinction between those 2 types of documents.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And just as a reminder for folks, if you joined a little bit late, please send us in your questions because we are going to be answering them live over the next 50 minutes or so. We got a few questions that we're going to be starting off with that we got before we started the webinar that are extremely common, like digital signatures. But we want to hear from you and send us any questions that you've got, and we'll do our best. Another question that we get all the time, Ben, and it's a bit controversial. Some people don't like the answer, but and that is, can you get rid of the additions and deletions report that comes along with all of our documents? If you're not familiar, if you've finalized any of our documents, you'll know that there is a report that comes out as part of the final document that's appended to it that shows things that have been changed from the original AIA standard language. And we call that the additions and deletions report. And a lot of folks have called up over the years and wanted to know, can I just get rid of that altogether? What's the answer to that one?
Not really, no. When you do a final, you do have a choice of clean or comparative. So I'll show you that option again. Let's go back to this draft. So when I click Finalize, here are the 2 options, clean or comparative. So if you do clean, and actually if you hover your cursor, you can say that it's going to be an additions and deletions report is at the end. A comparative, on the other hand, just has the document by itself with the changes in the text. So if you do a comparative final, it'll show the changes within the text, and there won't be a report. So in that sense, there won't be an additions and deletions report because all the additions and deletions will be right there within the body. But if you do a clean, no, you can't get rid of the report. So these are your only 2 options. You do have to show your work, essentially. So that is really the long and short of it. So you can get a final that is comparative without the report, but again, changes are going to show, and if you do a clean, they'll have the report, which that is part of the final document.
Yep, that's an excellent answer. And there's some real important policy reasons why we append that additions and deletions report to all of the documents that are finalized. Our documents, we update them every 10 years. We try to, at least. And so people, over the course of 10 years, and we don't change them dramatically iteration to iteration in most cases. So folks who regularly negotiate our contracts, they are very familiar with the way they read. So our A201, there are plenty of architects, contractors, owners, and attorneys out there who represent all of those parties who know, they might not be able to, literally memorize the entire thing, but there are some folks out there who have memorized big sections of our A201, and from just a fairness in contracting perspective, we want to have an environment, to foster an environment where we want to make it very clear when someone has added or changed something to our contracts that's not standard AIA language, so that we don't run into a problem of potentially tricking people that are used to an AIA document reading one way and they haven't noticed that it's been edited in some way. There's nothing at all wrong with editing our documents, and we just want to make sure that everyone recognizes when there is an edit. Another kind of a similar question that we get along those lines is, can we get rid of the little hashtags that are on the left margin that indicate where a change has been made? Those also become standard and they're locked so that you can tell where the edits have been made in the document and kind of correlate that down to the additions and deletions report. Folks will occasionally, throw away the additions and deletions report. You can do that. We don't encourage it, though.
Right, and there is a note on the final. This is not that same. This is a comparative final, so it's not the same thing. But there would be a note right about here under this little thing that says there's an additions and deletion report attached, and should be made available upon request. So there will be a little note on the final document that says that. I'll share a little personal example. I was on my condo board for a while. Somebody gave us an AI document. It was a final AI document, and they had done it clean, and they had not included the report. And so they asked me to take a look at it and said, well, okay, you need to give me the report. And so they did, because as the note that that exists says, it's supposed to be made available upon request. And here are the little lines on the left-hand side to show where a change was made. This is all part of track changes. This is not even something that's unique to AIA, but that's just showing you on the left-hand side where a change was made. So if you don't see a line, you can see that there wasn't a change. But if you do see a line, you know that somebody entered some information that changed the AI document.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about, kind of the typical owner-contractor agreement and all of the different documents that are part of the contract documents, it could be, an A101 agreement that's 15 pages long or so, an A201 general conditions that's, multitudes of pages, and then a whole slew of other documents. We want to make it very clear when someone's been has negotiated or changed a core provision or just any standard text from AIA language, and having the additions and deletions report just makes that contract review process much more streamlined. So,
right, and this is, by the way, what I was talking about. This is basically saying here the report is attached. So I just did a clean final, and so that's gonna show, here's the line, here's the changes, and then here's that little note about the additions and deletions that I was referring to before, so you can see it.
Yeah, and there are a number of other kind of things that you should be aware of with regard to our documents that let you know that you are looking at an official AIA document. For example, our watermark at the very top that has the AIA's logo, that it should be in color. That's an indicator that you're looking at a document that was produced in our software and hasn't been edited or changed in any way. Are there any other kind of things like that you can think of, Ben, that folks might want to? The footers are also kind of have a similar particular style to them as well.
Yeah, there are a few things. So there's this red AIA logo, which is an eagle in front of a column. That's the AIA logo, and of course the AIA registered trademark. The name of the document has a little TM here, dash the year it was published. You can see in kind of a light gray, there's the larger version of the logo on the left-hand side. This appears on every page of the final. And then there is the footer that you mentioned. This is just basic copyright stuff. So there's a little user note section here, so users can type in information after that. But this is just locked language, just saying that it's protected by federal copyright law and all that stuff.
Yeah, excellent. So another question that we commonly get, also just a reminder, send us your questions. We're getting we've had one come in. We're looking for others to respond to as well. Another question that we often get is, can I edit one of the G-Series forms? These are the change order form, the construction change directive, the substantial completion form. Can you edit those?
So the answer is sort of. So when you have a document, we were talking about final documents, which obviously is the final product, and there are options associated with that. But before you get a final, you have a draft. The draft can be a Microsoft Word file if it's an agreement, or an online form if it is a form. So I'll go ahead and create a document to show you. I'll create a form. Let's create G701, which is a change order. So something like A101, A105, those are agreements, but that's and so those drafts would be in Microsoft Word. They are pretty much fully editable in Microsoft Word. A form, like a change order or a pay application, that is considered to be an online form. So if I click it, it's going to can do some little importing here, but it's going to give me an online editor. So this is the draft, but instead of being in Microsoft Word that I save offline, I'm actually still in my browser here. So this is the form. You can obviously fill in the fill points. This is filled in because it's from the project data already. You can fill in fields like this. If I click Edit, I can just put text here, and I can bold it and make it different text sizes and colors and all that good stuff, and it'll appear here. Let's make it a little bit bigger so we can see it maybe. All right, there we go. So there is some editing that you can do there. This is really just a a fill point. Some areas you can edit. There's a little note here, and so you can't edit it directly. But if you edit it, if you click that button, you can edit some of the language here, and it makes that change for you. So in some cases, in some areas, you can actually make edits to the text, but in general, you can't really edit like this language, for example, here. That part is not editable. This part is not editable. This stuff over here. This little note is editable because you have a little edit button. So in some limited sense, there is a way to do some editing, but for the most part, forms are pretty much locked down, and you just type in the fields like here. You can make some changes. You can obviously type in fields with numbers or whatever like that, but for the most part, you can't really edit a form.
Yeah, good point. I think in general, a fair statement is that forms are less editable. They can always be filled out, but they're less editable than agreements. There's some reasons for that too. Our forms are very closely tied. First of all, there's some math that goes on in our forms that if you start to edit it, that would be screwed up. But also our forms are very closely tied to the language that's in our contracts. So you start to make changes to that, then you have kind of coordination issues. There's nothing wrong with adding perhaps an exhibit to a form that makes clarification in some way, but it's in general our forms are going to be not as susceptible to editing them directly. Then another question that we had, one that just came up here, was can the documents be printed and saved as a PDF? And so maybe you could tell us about how kind of begs for how do you finalize a document? We often have folks that say we've got a watermark, it's a Microsoft Word document, it just doesn't look final. How do I go about finalizing it?
Right. So with the draft, again, you have two types of drafts. What you're seeing right here is a form, so it's an online draft in this online form editor. So I just hit save. I saved it, and I can tell that it's been successfully saved, so that's great. So I saved it. I can close it. I can come back to it. I can edit as much as I want. For an agreement, a draft is just simply a Microsoft Word file. You work on it in Microsoft Word. You save it on your computer somewhere, and then you need to upload it. So right now, I have this draft online. I can just click Finalize, Generate Final. I can click that here. But let me go ahead and show you how to do that for an agreement. So again, form, fairly easy. I create my form. I save my form. It's an online draft, and here it is. It exists on my system. So it's right there. I can click Finalize from here. I can open it and finalize. Very simple. If I let's create another document. Let's just create an A101. I'll click Edit Offline here. So this is going to open up with Word. So it's going to open up Microsoft Word, and so I'm going to be able to save it. So you can just see it says draft, and this is the Microsoft Word file. And so I can just go ahead. I can edit this stuff. So if I hit backspace, it strikes it through. Put in some text, it'll add it. You see the little line. Again, this is all track changes. So let's just do a save as. Just save it somewhere. Let's see. Put it there. Sure. All right. So I saved it on my desktop, and so now I can just close out of it, come back to my program. So I'm back in my projects, and I've been working on it offline. You see, it's not listed because it's saved. I saved it on my desktop. So if I want to bring it back and I'm done, I'm finished, I click Import File. So I choose the file I want to import, and let's see here. Go to desktop here, I believe. Let's see here. Let's go here. Whatever I did most recently. Okay, so here it is. So now I chose that file. So this is the file. You can see has the Microsoft Word symbol, and so I've chosen it. I want to import. So this is going to import or upload the file, which again, it's just a Microsoft Word file. This is the draft. So it's been uploaded successfully. Great. It's a docx file, and there it is. Under type, I can see that it has the Microsoft Word symbol. So then I just click Finalize, and that will, again, give me the final document with the same sort of choices, so I can choose those options. And so that's how you do it. You just have to, you click Import File here, and then you have to choose where you've saved it, so you do need to remember where you saved it. And then you can just click Finalize to finalize. One important note about this is if you bought a single document, you can only finalize once. So don't do that unless you're super duper ready. If you have a license, it doesn't matter. You can finalize as many times as you want. But once you click Finalize and you actually go through this process, you click OK, you finalize like I did before, it's going to create that final document, and then you're done. That's it. So again, work on the draft, save it on offline, and you can log out. You don't have to be in here at all. You can spend most of your time and work in that Word file. Just in Microsoft Word, just a regular Microsoft Word file.
Excellent, Ben. And as you're answering that question, I'm sitting here thinking this is why folks really want to get you when they call into docinfo instead of me. You'll actually take the time to walk through, and because there is a bit of a process. There's two ways you can work on documents. You can work through them online or offline, like you were just showing. I would have just said, just hit finalize. That's what you do. But yeah, the upshot of all of that is you want to look for that finalize button. That's what creates your PDF for you. But thank you, Ben, for taking the time to go through that, because it's not. Once you've done it once, that finalization process is easy, but it might be a little bit counterintuitive for some folks doing it the first time. Kind of moving down a little. Actually, kind of a follow-up question here. Once you have a locked PDF, a lot of times folks will, they've been sent a locked PDF, or they've created a finalized PDF. And then folks want to know, well, how do I edit it from here? Can I get the password in order to edit the document? What do we tell them?
Yeah, so that's the thing is drafts are editable, finals are not. So the draft, whether it's this online draft with that little symbol or offline draft in Microsoft Word, that is fully editable. You can edit a draft. However, a final is going to be a locked PDF. You can't unlock it. You can't unprotect it. Final, you are done. So that goes back to what I was saying before. Don't finalize unless you are super duper 100% ready, because that final document is totally locked down. You can't unlock it. You can't unprotect it. You can open it. You can print it. You can email it to somebody else. You can download it. But other than that, you cannot edit it. So if you bought a single document and you finalize, then that's it. If you make a mistake, you'd have to buy it again in order to be able to click Finalize again. There is one other feature, and let me actually show you that right now. There's something called check variances. So if you look at these little actions here, you can take on the right-hand side, and you hover your cursor over the three dots, and you click check variances. Now, actually, before I do this, you can't do it with a form. So if I hover at a form, can't do it. But so I can't do it for G701, but I can do that for this. I think this is a really neat feature. It's totally optional, but it is very helpful. So this is going to check the variances on your working draft. You can do clean, you can do comparative. You can also do it as a PDF or Word. I recommend PDF for sure for the output is PDF, but you can choose clean or comparative as far as your choices. And then when you click OK, what it's going to do is it's going to take the working draft and it's going to create a variance checked draft. So this is a helpful feature because this is still a draft, but you can see it's a Microsoft Word file. So it's still got the draft watermark, but it is a PDF. It's not a Microsoft Word file. The working draft is Microsoft Word. The check draft you can do as a PDF. So this shows you the format. You can take a look at it. It's a PDF, so it's locked. You can't edit it. But if you look through and you see, oh, I made a mistake here, or I don't like this, or don't like that, not a big deal because it's not a final. So here's your final. Here's your check draft. So you can see they look kind of similar. But if you do the check draft and you find something you don't like, then you can say, oh, okay, no biggie, I just go back and edit my draft, my working draft, and then you can get your final from there. So again, you can see under the type category, we have this little globe symbol for forms. That means online draft. This means offline draft in Microsoft Word, and this means a PDF. So check draft can be a PDF. A final is always a PDF. So I have now my working draft and my check draft. I can take a look at that, and if I like it, then I can go ahead and finalize. That's great. I can finalize my working draft. I can download the check draft, and then if I want to make changes, I just work on the working draft offline, re-upload, and go and finalize. So that's the process.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben. So yeah, it can be, I'm sure it can be a little frustrating to folks to have a PDF that is locked that they can't access, but there's a reason behind that. We're trying to balance. We want to give folks the ability to edit their documents, negotiate, but we also want to give them a sense of security that once you've created a final PDF document, it's not going to get tampered with, or, you want to be able to lock the document down at a certain point so that once it's sent out to all the parties, it's somebody's not tampering with it or changing it in the background, and now you've got two different versions and it's hard to figure out which is the official version. So that security, while occasionally it can be a little frustrating, it is helpful. It is intended to help the users know that once you've created a PDF, it's going to stay that way. So I've got a couple of other questions come in. One that I'll just address really quickly. So someone says, I had to step away. Has anyone asked if we could have the option of having a final PDF without the additions and deletions report attached to it? We did answer that one. That was one of the first questions we answered earlier on here. And the answer is no. The additions and deletions report, for a variety of policy reasons, is something that's required with the document. You can throw it away. We don't advise that, though. So it will be generated standard. So
again, with the caveat that you can do a comparative final, which technically doesn't have the report, but the changes are still shown in the body, so that may not accomplish what you want to get.
Exactly. Yeah. So another question that just came in. I think a lot of folks who are in the construction industry are going to be very aware of our substantial completion form, right? It's a pretty popular form, commonly used. Do we have a final completion form?
We do not. So we have G704, which is a certificate of substantial completion. We do not have a certificate of final completion. One note about our forms, you can see there's a CMA edition here, and so we do have different versions of our forms. CMA stands for Construction Manager Advisor. That's actually, I think, the older version, because the 734 is the new one, right? Yeah, it is. Anyway, the point is, for a lot of our forms, we do have different versions. Let's look at G701, for example. There's different versions of our forms, but as far as completion, we have a certificate of substantial completion, but we do not have one for final completion, just G704, which is substantial completion. That's not exactly the same thing.
Correct. And there is a procedure for final completion that's in our A201 general conditions document. And I'm going to pull that up if my computer will behave and let me do that. But I believe it's in Article 9. So it does have some procedures that have to be followed for final completion and some things, obligations of all the different parties. But there's not actually a form in the sense that the substantial completion form is something that we actually offer. I'm going to scroll down here a little bit and find that.
Do you want to share your screen, Mike?
I would.
Or you want to just tell me? Yeah, I could pull up A201 also.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up A201. There's not a lot to share that's interesting, but I just want to make sure I've got the right section reference on that. Okay, so final completion is in Article 9, 9.10, which goes through that procedure. So
I can just pull that up really quickly.
I see you're much faster at that than I am. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so look at this. You can look up any document, and you can see so I just looked up A201. Here it is. And this is on the regular part. You don't even have to be signed in. Anybody can see this. And here's a free sample preview. So this is the sample whole thing. So you said what, Article 9? A21 is a long document, so it's got a nice long table of contents. But anyway, you can scroll down here. There's an issue with my mouse because the controller's here. Article 9 point something?
9.10.
9.10. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there are the substantial completion form has a number of things that need to be certified or committed to writing. Like warranties start at substantial completion unless otherwise noted in that form. There are signature lines for all the parties also to deal with things like utilities, security for the site. Those are all things that need to be agreed to in the substantial completion form. Work, there needs to be a list of work that's still outstanding and a estimate of the cost of the work for the outstanding work. So all of those things need to be memorialized in one place. When it comes to final completion, there's a lot of obligations, but it's not like you have a list of things that need to be memorialized in one place. So that's why one of the reasons why we have the substantial completion form, but we don't have a final completion form.
And this is the substantial completion form that I just pulled up.
Yep. Okay, so another question we just got, and of course, I'm just going to keep repeating myself occasionally. Please send us your questions. We're answering them live right now. So a question we just got for younger staff learning more, who want to learn more about contracts, can we access these forms for reviewing and learning purposes? And the quick answer is yes. We can access all of our documents in a sample form on our website. Just search. There's a number of ways you can search on aiacontracts.org. You can do a pinpoint search for a specific form. So, for example, if you want to look at our substantial completion form, just look up G704, or you can also browse an entire list, and you can find plenty of resources about each of our documents, the description of them, but there's also a little link for a sample document. You'll get a PDF which has a big thing that says sample on it, big watermark. So you can access those at any time.
Yes, that's right here. That's what I was doing. So you can go to aiacontracts.org. You can type in. I just typed in A201. I clicked on this. It gave me this page. So every document has its own page with the name of the document. And if you scroll down a little bit, there is a free sample preview. You click on that, and it gives you this, which is a PDF. It says sample. It's the whole entire document.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another question. It's a little bit longer, but I'm just going to go ahead and read it here. AIA contract documents used to be endorsed by the AGC before the introduction of consensus docs a dozen or so years ago. Does the AIA still try to get AGC input for updates to their owner-contractor agreements? We, as the writer mentioned, yes, there was, I believe there was a point in time a while back where there used to be endorsement by AGC on our documents. We still do get a considerable amount of, I'll just say, stakeholder input on whatever document we're producing. So if it is an owner-contractor agreement, we do reach out to a number of contractors, and we reach out to owners as well. We do peer reviews of our documents, or what we call liaison reviews of our documents, so that we make sure that we get input from folks who are in who are in that respective field. So another example is we did a land surveying agreement a few years back that we published. It's basically an owner surveyor agreement. We reached out to folks who were surveyors and who were project owners who had done a number of engagements with land surveyors. So we do make a good effort to try and get input from all parties so that we are putting out documents. Our goal is to write a document that is fair and right down the middle as best as we can. And if folks want to use that as the idea is really to give folks a level playing field to start negotiations. And if they want to negotiate and change the documents or edit it in some way, they're free to do that. Another question Ben, that we just got is, do we have, this is one that we get commonly, and it's a bit complicated, do we have a mechanics lien release form?
So we do not. We don't have any sort of lien release form. However, we do have a couple affidavits that are somewhat relevant. So I'm going to show you what we have. So if you go over here to template library, you can see the documents that we have. I'm going to go to the G series. The G series are forms. So we do not have any sort of lien release form. That is not a document, not a type of document that we have. Requirements vary by state for the release or waiver of liens, so the short answer is no, we do not. We do have a couple affidavits that are relevant. I have these two right here. G706, which is a contractor's affidavit of payment of debts and claims, and then more to the point, G706A, which is contractor's affidavit of release of liens. Now again, this is an affidavit. It is not a lien release. You have to attach the lien release to this document. So it is something that you can use with a lien release. It is not actually a lien release in and of itself.
Yep, that's exactly right. And the reason for that is mechanics lien laws, while there are some commonalities amongst the 50 states, there are also some very nuanced differences about what kind of information has to go into a mechanics lien release. So we don't offer a mechanics lien release because we would run into the issue of having to create 50 of them and then also have to update those 50 documents every few years as there are changes to mechanics lien laws. We see that as a big minefield and something that we, if you are, for example, looking for a mechanics lien release in Arizona, you're in the best position to figure out exactly what needs to go into that lien release because you're more familiar, and attorneys in Arizona are going to be much more familiar with the kinds of rules and Arizona local rules that go into mechanics lien releases in that state. So that's kind of why we do the affidavit approach. But yeah, mechanics liens are something that are very much a creature of state law, and you really need to look up all of the different nuances of mechanics liens in your particular state.
Yeah, you can see I just pulled up the affidavit, and you can see where it says supporting documents attached here too, and the very first thing is the actual lien release. That's what you're supposed to do.
Okay. All right, next question. Do we have a termination form?
We do not have a termination form. We have termination language in our agreements, and of course there are many agreements between many different parties, owner and architect, owner and contractor, contractor and subcontractor, et cetera, et cetera. But we do not have a separate form specifically to terminate a document or an agreement. Again, the agreements will typically go over suspension and termination. Most of them will have language stating what you're supposed to do, but as far as a separate form like this to terminate, we do not.
Sorry about that. Yep, excellent. Another question that we commonly get, Ben, is do we have a form to amend agreements? Amend owner-architect agreements, owner-contractor agreements?
Yes, we do. And so that is a very good question. So let's again look at the G series. So it depends on the type of agreement you want to amend, but we do have amendment forms. So we have, of course, your good old change order. Most people think of this as being time or money, and that's probably mostly the case, but it is really for any type of change to which all the parties agree. So this is to amend an owner-contractor agreement. We have our standard G701, updated in 2017. So if you wanted to amend an owner-contractor agreement such as A101, A102, A103, any owner-contractor agreement, and you wanted to update it for any reason, as long as all the parties agree, you would just use a change order. There are, again, other versions. There's the CMA edition, which is Construction Manager Advisor. There's this subcontractor version, which is if you wanted to amend something like a 401, which is a contractor-subcontractor agreement, you can do that. We also have, let me expand this a little bit, some other forms to amend like an owner-architect agreement. We have this notice, which is G801 of additional services, and then we have this G802, which is an actual amendment. So this is to give notice, and this is to actually amend an owner-architect agreement like B101 or B102, something like that. And then it's cut off here right before the last one, which is G803, and this is to amend a consultant services agreement. So if you were going to amend something like C401, which is an architect consultant agreement, we have that form as well. So short answer, yes. Long answer, it depends on which agreement you want to modify, but we do have several forms to amend different types of agreements.
Absolutely, and just kind of a follow-up note, you covered this point, but I want to reinforce it. With regard to amending owner-architect agreements, there are those two different forms. If you are amending an agreement for an owner-architect agreement to get additional services, if you're familiar with the B101 Article 4, there is a pretty rigid procedure there that spells out exactly what you're supposed to do as the architect to get, if you are trying to get paid for additional services. And so we have one form that helps walk you through that procedure. You got to give the owner notice and get written authorization of certain types of additional services in order to get paid for them. If you have an amendment that is not in contemplation of additional services and getting paid for additional services, say you want to just change like the mediation provision or you want to change something else about the owner-architect agreement, then that's when I think it's the G802 is the more basic, streamlined document that allows you to make those kinds of amendments.
Great.
Okay, so then I'm going to ask, sorry, did you have anything else to add to that?
Nope, sounds good.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to ask one, Ben, and feel free to kick this one back to me. This is kind of a complicated question. I had someone write in who I believe is an architect, says, we are asked by owners to produce owner-contractor agreements. Do most of your participants do that, or do they just give the owner access to the document in Word and tell them to fill it out? We spend a lot of time mediating between the owner and contractor on owner-contractor agreements. And not being lawyers can feel uncomfortable when the revisions requested by the contractor get to be considerable. Ben, do you have any thoughts on that one, or you want me to handle it?
Well, I will. I think I'll kick the main part of it to you, but I will just say that we are selling the documents. Anybody can buy them and use them. So if you're in a position where you're filling something out for somebody else, that can be a tricky situation. But we don't really give advice on that kind of thing. Obviously, as Mike said at the beginning, we can't give legal advice. But in addition to that, the documents they exist. They're editable. You can modify them. We also don't have data, so I can't tell you what people actually do with the documents or who's filling it out. We do have usage data. I don't even know if we make it public as far as what our commonly used documents are, but we don't necessarily break it down by who's doing what with a specific document. So if somebody's using, let's say, A101, we don't necessarily keep track of whether that person is an owner or a contractor, an architect, an attorney, or whatever. So we just don't have that type of data, so we can't really tell you what's really common in the industry. But if maybe for more information, Mike, you might want to go into some more detail about what an architect might actually do.
Sure, absolutely. And I'm actually scrolling through our B101 to find the exact language. Just a moment. Okay, so there is definitely some language that gets to this issue in Article 3 of the B101, and when I have a moment, I'll try and find that a little bit better. I definitely, so certainly architects are often put in the position of, helping the owner figure out which contract to use, right? That is significantly different from participating, saying here's a, if you are doing a lump sum contract on a design build project, here's a A201 and an A101. This is, standard AIA contracts for a lump sum type of a project. that and pointing out and just and literally handing over to the owner, here's a standard form of agreement that would be a starting point, is different than literally assisting in negotiations between the owner and contractor. And there is some language, like I said, there's some language in the B101 that gets to this point, but certainly if you're participating in negotiations between the owner and contractor, you're probably doing something that is going to be a little bit tricky, right? Because you're probably not, you're probably not an attorney. You're arguably starting to do legal work once you're attempting to, participate in negotiations on that level. Probably something that you're not comfortable doing, obviously, by the nature of the question. So there's definitely a distinction between, helping the owner find the right contracts that might be a starting point for negotiations, and then going and literally assisting in negotiations. That is the kind of thing that should be done. Those kinds of negotiations should be done between the owner and their, attorneys, and the contractor and their attorneys. The architect should really not be involved in that level of negotiations. Yeah, if I have a chance, I'll try and find that particular language, but I might have to do that offline. Okay, so another question, Ben, that we get quite often is, do you have, we have a lot of owner-architect agreements, and I think sometimes when folks see our agreements and the list of owner-architect agreements that we have, they get a little bit confused as to which ones they should be using in which particular scenarios. Quite often folks ask, do we have an owner-architect agreement for small projects?
Yes, we do. So there are a lot of different tools you can use to decide which document that you might want to pick. There are, of course, a lot of documents to choose from. So there's a little tool here when you're logged in. It says, help me select an AI template. And this just, that's a disclaimer saying we can't give legal advice, but it asks you for different questions. So I could say I'm looking for an agreement. I'm looking in the conventional family. Let's say we'll say no for sustainability. Single project. You're just kind of narrowing it down here. Owner architect. Agreement. So we've already narrowed it down a lot here just by answering a few questions. I said, okay, I was looking for a conventional owner-architect agreement. It gave me several of these. We have different, what we call families or groups of documents. And so the documents are organized two ways, by family and also by series. So the series is the letter, like B101, B102, etc. The shortest owner-architect agreement is this one right here, B105. This is the absolute shortest and simplest owner-architect agreement that we have. You can look it up. You can see samples. You can see previews and all that stuff. And so, again, we have different families or groups of documents. The small family is just two documents, this one and the associated owner-contractor agreement, which is A105. So instead of B, it says A, and that's owner and contractor. This one is owner and architect. A lot of our documents are somewhat lengthy, like our standard B101, the big guy. We also have something in between. This is actually the abbreviated form. So if you think of this as being small, we have large, and then we have in between medium. So small, medium, large. All of this is extremely subjective, of course, but you can tell just by those descriptions that this is the shortest in terms of number of pages, this is kind of in between, medium, and then this is big. So just, again, I'm speaking very broadly here, but we do have small, medium, and large. Our other families of documents outside the conventional family are mostly longer. So those are longer documents, but within the conventional most popular family, we do have the small, medium, and large.
Yeah, excellent. And I would say that the difference as far as size and complexity between the B101 and the B104 is it's that big. I mean, there's definitely a decent size difference in complexity level between B101 and B104, but there is a much bigger drop-off between the B104 and the B105, and
yes,
similarly between the A104 and the A105. The A105 and the B105 are extremely short, extremely pared down documents that don't have a lot of the complexity that even the B104 has. So I guess you could call it, instead of small. Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
I was just going to say, so this is B105. This is what I'm calling the small. This is only 3 pages. And then if you compare that to B101, 23 pages. Obviously a huge difference there, and I'll pull up the medium also. But what were you were going to say something too, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe an easier way to think of it instead of small, medium, large is like tiny, medium, and large. And like child size. I mean, toddler, medium, and large. So,
and this one's
yeah,
14.
and those are the kind of things.
14 and what, 23? So yeah, just to give you a general idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's I think we have some materials on our Learn page about kind of comparing. We've got plenty of webinars in the past that we've done that compare the different, what kinds of things are in the B104 that are not in the B105. It's just the kind of thing that you'll have to, there is no substitute for just actually printing these things off and reading them and recognizing, that there's quite a lot of things that show up in those B104 and B101 documents that don't show up in the B105. And it's not really easy for us to say, well, these are the important things you have to pay attention to, because depending on what issue you run into in your project, anything can be important if it's not in your contract. Right. So. Right.
And one thing just off the top of my head is dispute resolution. That's something that the large and the medium contain that the small B105, A105 does not contain. There's just no language dealing with potential disputes in the small once you get down to the small. So that's just one difference, just as an example.
Excellent. We are kind of running up against the end of the hour, but I'll do one more question, and that is, something we get pretty commonly. We have a lot of owner-architect agreements. But there's plenty of folks out there who are designers who are not architects. Maybe they are interior designers, or they're folks who have gotten, 90% of the way through their architectural exams. They just haven't got their license yet. So do we have a owner-designer agreement?
So we have an owner-consultant agreement, which is C103. So this document uses the term consultant, which is broad. Obviously, the term architect means something very specific, somebody who is licensed and registered as an architect. And so we do have this C103 agreement, which is between owner and consultant. The consultant could be anybody. It could be an architect who's not licensed yet. It could be some sort of design professional. It could be an engineer, civil, mechanical, whatever. We do have to go along with that. So this agreement has no scope. There's no scope, no specific scope of consultant services. So to go along with this, we also have some scope documents: land survey, geotechnical engineering, commissioning, sustainability. So we do have some scope documents that you can attach to that if you're going to do one of those very specific services. Or you can just always attach your own scope. But that is a very broad agreement, C103, very broad agreement between owner and consultant.
Yeah, and you'll need to. So if you are going to be doing, let's say, design work for a home that might necessarily, because of its size, it might not need to have an architect actually, stamp the plans, which is a lot of times what happens in these scenarios. You'll have someone who's not licensed as an architect, but they can do certain types of projects, and they need an agreement for that. So you'll need to actually, if you're using the C103, you'll need to actually describe what your scope of services are in Article 3 of that document, because it does not have a preset scope of services. One other cautionary thing that I should point out is there are one easy fix that a lot of folks think is easy, but it can cause problems, is just to take our B101 and then do a word search and change all of the references to architect to designer. Now that should, that in some way solve the problem. You're not calling yourself an architect, but the reason I say that can be a cause for concern is, everything else about Article 3 in B101 is describing architectural services. And you can run yourself into some problems by, even if you're not using the word architect, if you are doing architectural services, you could, if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck, your state you might actually run into some problems with your Architectural Practice Act in your particular state. You can still be found to have, be violating that act if you're acting like an architect, even though you're not necessarily calling yourself an architect. That was a long, convoluted way, and I didn't say that perfectly, but I think you all get the gist of that. So it's the end of the hour. I tried. Ben, we're at 3 o'clock. Anything else? Anything else we need to chat about before we end?
I think that's it. I think we covered a lot of stuff. Maybe not everything, but I think we covered a lot of the most basic questions about the documents.
Yes, and there was the one person who asked about the negotiating owner-contractor agreements. I'm going to send you a follow-up because I did find the section. It is, let's pull it up right here. It is section 3.5.1 of the B101 that gets to that issue. And I'll send you that link and some further description here in an email. So thank you, everyone, for joining us.
There it is.
Yes, sir.
There it is right there.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.